Hello everyone, I am Miss L. Kanjitringal and today I will be explaining a lesson in prose taken from Echoes, the singing lesson by Katherine Mansfield. Before I begin with today's class, let me give you all a short introduction. I have been teaching ISC students for the past 20 years. I am an ELT trainer myself and it is their request that has made me open my own YouTube channel. I will be discussing the chapter, various figures of speech used in it, important paras, keywords and the marking scheme towards the very end of the chapter. If you watch each and every video I upload on the channel, let me assure you that you will be scoring high in the subject English, both literature and language. Warning, you have to keep a pen handy to jot down notes for the same. Running in the 11th hour is not going to help you. I will be covering pages 91 to 93 today in your first video. Do like, subscribe, comment and share. Happy learning, children. The singing lesson by Katherine Mansfield. With despair, cold, sharp despair, buried deep in her heart like a wicked knife, Miss Meadows, in cap and gown and carrying a little baton, trod the cold corridors that led to the music hall. In the very first 3 lines, you come to know about 2-3 things together. The first thing is, the word which stands out over here is despair. Despair basically speaks of hopelessness. You're understanding? So like when I talk about despair, it basically shows that the protagonist of the story, the hero of the story, the heroine of the story, she is not in a good frame of mind. And when the writer starts the story with despair, he says, cold, sharp despair buried deep in her heart like a wicked knife. Now what does the word, see the line over here, buried deep in her heart like a wicked knife, does not mean that physically the knife twisted and it was there in her heart. It's a metaphor, children. Alright, and now you'll be asking me what is supposed to be a metaphor. A metaphor is supposed to be a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. That is a metaphor. So like when you talk about a wicked knife, it basically means like you can visualize, like, you know, if there is something which has pinched you, there is something which has hurt you a lot, you can simply say that it was like a knife buried deep in my heart. Exactly like that. That is the metaphor which has been used over here. Alright, and it says Miss Meadows, she's the protagonist of the story, she's the heroine of the story. She's there in cap and gown and carrying a little baton. Alright, now the baton, like, you know, when you talk about a baton, what is supposed to be a baton? A baton is a thin stick which is used by a conductor to direct an orchestra or a choir. Alright, so basically she was carrying a baton. She was the music mistress. That is the first thing which comes to your mind when you hear about this. And she trod the cold corridors. The word cold over here, what does it mean? It basically means, or it is associated with you can say the atmosphere of the story, but it is not only the atmosphere of the story, children. It is something else too. And what is it? It basically tells us about the temperament of the people there. It talks to us, or it rather tells us about what kind of physical problems they were having. And like when you hear the word cold, despair, sharp, buried deep, wicked knife, all this bring to the fore a feeling of gloom, a feeling of sadness, a feeling of depression, a feeling of some negativity which is about to be unfolded in the coming sentences. Alright, so she was there, she trod the cold corridors that led to the music hall. Girls of all ages, rosy from the air. Rosy basically means that it's not a color only. Rosy definitely has rosy cheeks, dimpled chin, but rosy basically is also associated with someone who is very in the throes of their youthful exuberance, or you can say rosy basically means associated with the word lively. They were lively from the air and bubbling over with enthusiasm. What happens to you all when you are attending your class for the very first time? Very first time, maybe after the summer break or right after the winter vacation, you are like literally brimming over with joy. You're just wanting to tell everyone that what took place over a particular period of time, and during the vacations, what all did you do, where did you go, what did you do, whom did you visit, everything is there. So exactly like that, the girls of all ages, rosy from the air and bubbling over with that gleeful excitement. Gleeful is happiness that comes from running to school on a fine autumn morning. The writer also gives the reason why the girls were rosy and why they were bubbling over with enthusiasm. Because they had run, they had hopped, they had skipped, they had fluttered by. That is, fluttering is moving lightly and quickly. They had fluttered by, and from the hollow classrooms came a quick drumming of voices. And from the hollow classroom, the classrooms were hollow. Why were they hollow? They were hollow because the children were not there. And suddenly, once the children had occupied these classes, came a quick drumming of voices. A bell rang, alright? A voice like a bird cried Muriel. And then there came from the staircase a tremendous knock, knock, knocking. Someone had dropped her dumbbells, alright? Someone had dropped a dumbbell. What is supposed to be? It's a kind of an instrument which, like, is used when you're trying to build up muscles, alright? So someone had dropped her dumbbells, and that is basically what the noise was. The science mistress stopped Miss Meadows. Now here we come to another character in the story, that is the science mistress. Like, when you hear their conversation for the very first time, it is brought to your notice that there is some kind of animosity between these two. These two characters are not on good terms, if I may use that word over here. And it's true, because the science mistress stopped Miss Meadows. And what does she say? She says, "Good morning," she cried, in her sweet, affected drawl. "Isn't it cold? It might be winter." She says, drawl is like, saying something very slowly just because you want to drag that word. Some people have this habit of speaking quite slowly, and some people like me, like for example, I have this habit of talking 19 to a dozen, you can say. I also have this habit of talking a little fast. I'm like, I don't like to chew my words a lot and spit them out, but rather I prefer to get it over and done with as quickly as possible. So exactly like that. So she says good morning, and then she says it might be winter. Miss Meadows, again you have the knife, the metaphorical knife, hugging the knife, stared in hatred at the science mistress. Why does it say hugging the knife? Because she hated the science mistress. That is the reason it says hugging the knife. And the knife is a symbol of animosity, and the knife is also a symbol of hatred. That is the reason it says, because she wanted to, it basically means, it shows that how what do you call it, in simpler terms, if you make it sound like, she hated her with all her heart. That is the reason, that is the association with the knife. Stared in hatred at the science mistress. Everything about her was sweet. That is one of the reasons why she hated her. Pale like honey. You would not have been surprised to see a bee caught in the tangles of that yellow hair. And she says that, the kind of hair she had, it was perfect yellow. And you would not have been surprised. It's a way of saying it. You would have been surprised to see a bee caught in the tangles of that yellow hair. And it basically means that a bee also could have mistaken that for a yellow flower, or that hair of hers could have been mistaken by a bee for a yellow flower. It is rather sharp, said Miss Meadows grimly. The other smiled her sugary smile. Sugary is a word which is associated with something negative, alright? So she says, yes, the Miss Meadows says, the weather is sharp today. You look frozen, said she. Who is the she over here? The science mistress. Her blue eyes opened wide. There came a mocking light in them. And there was something making fun, mocking is when you're trying to make fun of someone or something in a very cruel manner. So she makes fun of him, and she makes fun of her, and she says her blue eyes opened wide and there came a mocking light in them. So the science mistress says that Miss Meadows, there is you look frozen, you look absolutely frozen. Had she noticed anything? Oh, night? No, quite as bad as that, said Miss Meadows. And she gave the science mistress, in exchange for her smile, a quick grimace and passed on. And then she says, Miss Meadows said, no, it is not that bad. And then she gave the science mistress, in exchange for a smile, like, something which shows disgust, all right, in an ugly expression of, like, face, which basically shows that she's not very happy with the science mistress, and she moved on. Forms 4, 5 and 6 were assembled in the music hall. Forms 4, 5 and 6 were assembled in the music hall. And the noise was deafening. What are forms? Forms are basically classes, alright. Classes 4, 5 and 6 were assembled in the music hall. And Miss Meadows' favorite, who played accompaniments, she was also there. Who was she? She was Mary Beasley. Every teacher has a pet favorite in her class, alright. And for Miss Meadows, who was her pet? Her pet was Mary Beasley. So, Miss Meadows' favorite, that is the reason the writer says favorite, she was the one who played accompaniments, alright. Basically, accompaniments is a musical part which supports or partners an instrument, a voice or a group. That is an accompaniment. She was turning the music stool, and when she saw Miss Meadows, she gave a loud warning, alright. Shh, 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 girls. We do that, alright. When we are there in the class, when we are there, like, when we see the teacher coming down the corridor, and there's always a person standing, keeping an eye whether the teacher is there somewhere near, or the moment he sees or she sees a teacher coming or walking down the corridor, she gives the signal, alright. And that's exactly what the children did. She said shh, 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 or rather in this case it was Mary Beasley. She said girls and Miss Meadows. Her hands thrust in her sleeves, the baton there in her, under her arm, strode down the center aisle, mounted the steps, turned sharply, seized the brass music stand, planted it in front of her, and gave 2 sharp taps with her baton for silence. Then she said, silence, please, immediately. And then, looking at nobody, her glance swept over that sea of colored flannel blouses. Flannel is a soft woven fabric. It is made of wool or cotton and slightly, like, milked, and it's raced. So basically what is the writer trying to tell us over here? That she is trying to set the picture, trying to tell us a clear picture of a normal day in a normal school taught by a normal teacher. And when she saw Miss Meadows, and Mary Beasley, she acts like an absolute student, what children do usually. It was a normal setting, and it was the way it was supposed to be. And then, with bobbing pink faces and hands, quivering butterfly hair bows, and music books outspread. That was the general setting of the story, alright, where the scene takes place. She knew perfectly well what they were thinking. Maddie is in a wax. And what does Miss Meadows think? She says that because of her sour face, or you can say because of the way that she was behaving, the children would definitely be thinking that Maddie, you all have this habit of giving every teacher a name, a nickname. And exactly like that, Miss Meadows for the girls was Maddie, and they knew it. Alright, and even Miss Meadows knew it. So she says Maddie is in a wax. That is, wax means she's upset. Well, let them think it. Her eyelids quivered, that is, they trembled and they shook with a slight rapid motion. She tossed her head, defying them. What could the thoughts of those creatures matter to someone who stood there bleeding to death, pierced to the heart by such a letter? Now she says that for her, for Miss Meadows, these children, their thoughts did not matter. She did not give a damn, if frankly speaking. Why? Because according to her, these creatures, that is what she calls them, for her they did not matter. Because Maddie, that is Miss Meadows, she was visualizing herself standing over there, bleeding to death. What was the reason that she was bleeding to death? That we'll come to know in the coming lines. Pierced to the heart. Piercing the heart automatically means you have that illusion of the knife, alright? And then you have piercing her heart. that automatically means that she had some hidden pain that she could not tell anyone. She was suffering, and she could not tell anyone what exactly was the reason because of which she was suffering. I feel more and more strongly that our marriage would be a mistake. These are the words of the letter written by her fiancé. And what was her fiancé's name? Her fiancé's name was Basil. Alright? And what did he say? He says that the marriage is going to be a mistake. Alright? She was affianced. Miss Meadows was affianced. Not that I do not love you. Her would-be husband says that it's not the reason that I don't love you, that is the reason I'm breaking off this engagement, but rather I love you as much as it is possible for me to love any woman. That's a very sorry comparison. Like telling a woman that he can love her as much as he could love any other woman is not a healer, according to me. But truth to tell, I have come to the conclusion, and finally he says that I have understood that I am not the marrying kind. That means I will not be able to marry and settle down. And he says, in the next line he says, the idea of settling down fills me with nothing but disgust. See, he says that he's not the marrying kind, and thinking about the fact that he might be getting married, he will have to settle down, he'll have to give his philandering ways, I can say, if I can use that word over here, and at the same time settling down gives him nothing but disgust. And then he scratched out that word lightly. He did not even have the decency. Disgust is a very strong word, children. Alright, when you say that something fills you with disgust, that means you're horrified with that idea. It's repulsive. So it's a very strong word. So he writes disgust, then he thinks that she might feel upset about this word, so he scratches it out. But he does not scratch it, he scratches it out lightly, and the other person can still read it. So you can, from this line itself, you can make out what an unfeeling man this Basil was, and regret written over the top. Basil. Miss Meadows stalked over to the piano, that is moving slowly and quietly, and Mary Beasley, who was waiting for this moment. You see, Mary Beasley had no idea that her teacher, her favorite teacher, was suffering. So she says, so she's standing over there waiting for this moment. She bent forward, her curls fell over her cheeks while she breathed. Good morning, Miss Meadows. And then she says, good morning, Miss Meadows. And then she motioned towards, rather than handed to her mistress, a beautiful yellow chrysanthemum. Alright, and that's a beautiful looking yellow flower. Alright, and then the writer says this little ritual is a ceremony and a kind of an action which is performed in a prescribed order, and this ritual of the flower had been gone through for ages and ages, from the time that Miss Meadows had joined and from the time that Mary Beasley had become her favorite student. This little ritual, this ceremony of handing over the flower before starting with the lesson, it had gone on through ages and quite a term and a half. That was a time period. It was as much part of the lesson as opening the piano, and like, you know, you cannot even, the children could not even fathom, they could not even imagine a day going by when Mary had not handed over a yellow flower to her teacher, yellow, red, green, blue, yellow, basically chrysanthemum, to her teacher. But this morning, instead of taking it up, instead of tucking it into her belt, while she leaned over Mary and said, "Thank you, Mary, how very nice," turned to page 32. What was Mary's horror when Miss Meadows totally ignored the chrysanthemum? And like this time, usually she was in a very good mood, but this time she was not. And what did she do? She totally ignored the chrysanthemum. She did not reply at all to her greeting, but said in a voice of ice, and she was very, very irritated. She said, I'm like, you could make out when the teacher is in a very foul mood, what happens to you all. You all also understand that the teacher is not in a very good mood. And then definitely she said, page 14 please, and mark the accents well. Staggering moment. That is shocking moment for her. Mary blushed until the tears stood in her eyes. But Miss Meadows was gone back to the music stand because, you know, she could not take this affront lightly. Mary was like, you know, her favorite. And her teacher had totally ignored her. So that brought tears to her eyes. And her voice rang through the music hall. Page 14, we will begin with page 14, a lament. Now look at the choice of the song, a lament. What is basically a lament? A lament is supposed to be a song which basically brings out grief, alright, and agony. That is a lament. It talks about loss, Alright, and that is what made Miss Meadows had chosen. Now girls, you ought to know it by this time. What does it tell us about her mood? The lament, the choice of the song itself tells us that Miss Meadows was not in a good mood. Alright, because when you are happy, you want to listen to numbers which make you happy. When you are happy, you want to listen to songs, disco music, you want to listen to salsa, rumba and dance about, but you don't feel like listening to a funeral death. You don't want to listen to a funeral song. Exactly like that. That song itself spoke volumes. And then girls, you ought to know it by this time. We shall take it together, not in parts. Now quickly, simply and without expression. She makes it very clear to them. They were to sing a lament without expression. Sing it though quite simply, beating time with the left hand, and with your left hand you're supposed to beat time too. That is and the main thing which we come to know about this particular chapter is that the mood, the dominant mood of Miss Meadows. You have to see how her mood is transferred onto the girls. The girls, when they walked in, they had no idea that Miss Meadows was suffering. Why was she suffering? Because her fiancé, if I can use that word, ditched over here, had ditched her. So basically, she was in a foul temper, she was unhappy, and she wanted to take it out. It happens with us too. When we are unhappy, we want to take it out on others. We don't want to see anyone happy. That's a normal human tendency. And that is exactly what happened with Meadows too. Miss Meadows was unhappy and she hated that flower that day. Why she hated it? Because it showed youthful exuberance and she was not in a good mood. So she wanted to do away with that flower altogether. She did not want to see anyone smiling, and that is the reason she chooses that particular lament. With this, I stop the video for the day, and then from my next class onwards, I'll move forward. Thank you, children. Thank you so much. And I hope, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and press the icon. Thank you so much.